Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I need a home. I can't sleep.
6 months later and homeless. From Abbotsford to Merritt, the toll flooding is still taking on British Columbians, desperate to rebuild.
Farmers, in a way, are rock stars these days. And I think a lot of them are starting to realize that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's extremely difficult.
And for farmers without crops, we seek accountability tonight from BC's Agriculture Minister. And
they have no sympathy, they have no heart for the families of the victims.
Plus calls for Canada to cancel a soccer match with Iran. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe, and tonight I'm in Abbotsford for our live special for the 6th-month anniversary of BC's devastating floods. Dry land tonight, but right here where we are standing at Upper Sumas Elementary on the Sumas Prairie, the water was actually up to my chest at its peak. An extreme rainstorm dumped record rainfall across this part of southwest BC and further west into the interior. This area around me is a natural floodplain filled with water as rivers burst their banks and the rain kept falling, forced people to abandon their homes. Some fought to save their animals and protect their farms. 6 months later, the cleanup is still happening. I want to bring in our Anita Bathe now, who, like me, is also from the city of Abbotsford. And Anita, you've been speaking with people who are still displaced. You've been talking to them, since the floods actually took place 6 months ago. But what have they been telling you recently?
Well, Anita, some are still gutting and repairing their homes. They're really building back. For others, it's nearly impossible to find new homes because rents are expensive, prices are high. And look, the water's gone, but barns are still battered. There's debris. Homes still sit empty. And while some have made it home, others are still displaced and they're wondering what's next.
This was once home for Katrina Page. Her home near Hope, a place she knew as paradise, now unrecognizable.
It's surreal. It's still kind of surreal. It's a lot.
Her mortgage-free home was nestled next to the Coquihalla River, but in November, water tore through the property. Page says she didn't qualify for flood insurance because the house was on a floodplain. Disaster financial assistance has been offered to cover some uninsurable losses, and while she's grateful,
they're offering us a pittance really of what we lost.
Page is among 1,100 households still displaced from their homes in BC. Emergency Management BC says there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and they're working on recovery plans for communities to get funding quickly. Page is currently living in a trailer with her husband, and they're hoping for a buyout. Without it,
there's no way we can afford to stay here, so I don't know where we're going to end up. I need a home. I can't sleep.
For some, finding a new affordable home seems out of reach due to high rents. CBC has agreed to withhold the identity of 2 Abbotsford flood victims due to their concerns about safety and how speaking out could hurt their chances of finding new rentals.
It's a lot of renters that are the ones left behind. Really tired and overwhelmed with and disappointed in how hard it is just to get a place to live.
Since the flood, one is still in a hotel. The other is in a trailer, pregnant, and also hoping for a long-term affordable home.
I want 4 walls and I don't want to wake up in the morning and have to worry about where I'm going to lay my head.
Others, like John Youngama, are back on their property, but the house is still under repair.
I mean, it was a complete gut. We had to gut the entire house, right, all the way up to the ceiling.
He and his wife currently live in a trailer after months of being in hotels. And last November, his son and dog were rescued after waiting hours in as much as 8 feet of water. But even as homes rebuild, John hopes more is done to protect the community.
We can't go through this again. Like, this is just unbelievable.
Clearly, Anita, the devastation is still there. I mean, it's horrible. I personally know people who are still out of their homes as well. And you mentioned more than 1,150 people across the province are still displaced. And that's why community support is so vital, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of pain. It's not easy. And donations are still needed, whether that's mental health support, food, furniture. But I'll have more on that later on in the show.
Okay, thanks, Anita. I want to go now to Merritt. It was another area that was devastated by the floods. Last November, the Coldwater River burst its banks. Most residents have since moved back home, but others are still displaced. Brady Strachan shows us where they are living and why some are wondering if they'll ever be able to return.
You can see how high the mud got here. And I had to shovel this all out by hand, which I piled over there.
Chris Kirk has spent the last 6 months living in a hotel room, but almost daily he returns to his trailer to repair flooding damage. There's electrical and plumbing work, as well as ripping out the ceilings and walls after mold set in.
Like, I still can't believe I'm still living in a hotel. It's like, you know, that all this happened. You know, it's overwhelming.
The flood last November forced the evacuation of the entire city of Merritt. More than 1,000 homes were flooded. 6 months later, 66 properties still remain on evacuation order.
You can see here how high the water came.
Cheryl Douglas's home is beyond repair. She's living in a camping trailer beside her old home to guard her belongings after several break-ins. But after months of living like this, frustrations are mounting.
This city has not helped us at all. And yeah, it hurts. It hurts big time because I've got to lose everything.
Right now, people with homes near the river don't know if they will be allowed to move back. Merritt is doing a flood mapping study to determine where to build a permanent dike that will protect the city from the kinds of water flows the river saw last November.
For many individuals, we can't, of course, guarantee at this point, they are going to be able to stay on their properties. And if in the event they aren't, we will advocate as hard as possible to make sure that the value of the repair works that they have put into their homes will be accounted for should they be required to relocate.
For many people here, that uncertainty is hard to live with, especially for those living by the river who don't want to relocate.
Like, where am I supposed to move my home to? You know, I can't afford to move it. I don't have the money to rebuild the skirting and you know, all that. So it's like, we're left in limbo.
For now, all displaced residents can do is wait and continue to repair their homes, even if there's no guarantee that home they're fixing up is the one they'll be able to return to. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Merritt.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins me for the first time, I think, in person in many years.
Yes,
really.
in many years. Yes, nice to see you in person.
Nice to see you as well. And what a beautiful day for this.
Such a contrast, as you said, to what this spot looked like 6 months ago today. But yeah, I'm glad we have a nice blue sky, green grass day today.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, yes, a contrast. So we want to talk about the flooding and, you know, the chances of something like what happened in November happening again. What are the chances?
Well, Anita, we already know that the meteorological events that led to the flooding, 60% more likely to have occurred because of climate change. And we're now learning more about the flood risk for both the Sumas and the Nooksack River. What was a 1 in 100 year event by the end of the century expected to become a 1 in 20 year event. So we know we're going to see these conditions come together more often in a warming future. And we know that the rainfall will be more intense with these atmospheric rivers. We will see less snowpack, but more of that will come down as rain. And one of the problems we had during the flooding was that early snowpack melted so quickly. We spoke to a Washington climate scientist because, of course, the flooding issues are cross-border, and he talked about how important that snowpack is moving forward in a warming climate. Take a listen.
As we have less snowpack, what that does is it raises the snow line. So it means there's more area that is that it's raining on when we have a storm coming in, more area that's receiving rainfall as opposed to snow. And if it's rain, that means it can run off and into the river and contribute to flooding. And so as the snow line goes up, our flooding gets worse.
And Anita, speaking of snowpack, that is something that is of concern. You can see the snow in the mountains behind us. It's late for the melt. This is an area that traditionally does see flooding when we do have that big snow melt, and I've yet to see it in the cards. I know it's on the back of all farmers' minds. We don't have that dramatic warm up, but the longer we wait, the better chance we see flood risk this year.
Okay, well, let's keep our fingers crossed for sure. Thanks, Joan. We'll talk to you again later in the show.
Good.
All right, we have so much more from the Sumas Prairie in Abbotsford tonight, including an interview with BC's Agriculture Minister and Abbotsford's Mayor. He's standing by right now, so he's going to be live with us in the show. But first, we go back to Dan in Vancouver with the rest of the day's news. Dan?
Anita, thank you very much. The BC government is taking more heat from the opposition over its decision to build a new Royal BC Museum at a cost of nearly $800 million. Officials are defending the project over dealing with the cultural aspects and the safety of the building itself. The museum was built using asbestos, a major consideration in the decision to build a new one. Newly sworn-in Liberal leader Kevin Falcon is demanding the government release the business case for the project.
If the Premier thinks that this vanity museum project can withstand the scrutiny, will they table a full unredacted business plan today in this House?
Government officials are calling the project a generational investment and intend on sharing some of the business plan information by the end of this week. For the first time in more than 2 years, a cruise ship has docked in Prince Rupert. Cruises have been absent from the city since the start of the pandemic. Now the Port Authority is expecting over 60,000 passengers and 43 of the big ships to visit the city this year. Locals and businesses are gearing up for a significant boost to the local tourist economy. Today's ship, the Ruby Princess, brought more than 4,000 folks into town.
It's been a long 2 years, and the merchants will be pleased. The school kids will probably be down later singing. It's fabulous.
Its estimated cruise season brought in $2.7 billion to the BC economy before the pandemic shutdown. Cruises are scheduled to arrive in Prince Rupert until September 30th. Still on the sea, BC Ferries has added more than 100 extra sailings to help meet demand ahead of the May-long weekend. Reservations on most South Coast routes were booked up weeks ago, but an influx of new staff means Ferries has been able to add 110 sailings. The majority of them are between Vancouver and Victoria. Other sailings have also been added between Horseshoe Bay and Departure Bay, as well as Horseshoe Bay and Langdale. You can find more details on the BC Ferries website. A West Vancouver resident may face charges for allegedly feeding local bears and coyotes. Conservation officers were tipped off and intercepted the person last week. They remind the public of the danger of feeding wild animals. Feeding dangerous wildlife is an offense under the BC Wildlife Act. Anyone caught doing it could get hit with fines of up to $100,000.
There's a reason why it's illegal. We understand that people want to care for wildlife, but feeding wildlife compromises both public safety and the welfare of the animal.
Officers say it's too early to determine how much the West Vancouver resident may be fined. Anyone with information about someone feeding wildlife is asked to report it to the Report All Poachers and Polluters hotline. Still with animals, BC bird lovers are causing a flap over TransLink's practice of trapping and killing pigeons at its SkyTrain stations. Over 1,700 people have signed an online petition to end that program. But TransLink says pigeons are a huge problem for the train system. The birds leave their droppings, damage equipment, and trigger false alarms that bring those trains to a halt. The BCSBCA is investigating TransLink's trapping practice with concerns about animal cruelty. But so long as the birds have food and water and are not in distress, those traps are not illegal. A Haida Gwaii community could soon have a new original name. Last night, councillors for the village of Queen Charlotte voted unanimously to change the name back to Dodgine Geeds. In the works since 2019, the change sees the community returning to its traditional Indigenous name, which was changed by white settlers in 1908. Dodgine Geeds is said to mean common hat or dancing hat. The proposal will now head to the province for approval. An international men's soccer match between Canada and Iran has come under criticism. The tilt is set to be played at BC Place here in downtown Vancouver in early June, but it's being called disrespectful to the families of 85 Canadians who were killed when Iranian missiles shot down flight PS 752 in early 2020. As Ashley Burke reports, some want that match to be cancelled.
Iran leads. FIFA recently faced calls to ban Iran's soccer team from competition after this. Video on social media appearing to show Iranian women alleging they were pepper sprayed, prevented from entering a soccer match after FIFA ordered Iran to end its 40-year ban on women attending sporting events. Now Canada is also facing calls to cancel a soccer game in Vancouver next month.
I feel betrayed by the organization here in Canada, betrayed by the government. That's her team and that's Rira almost 3 years ago.
Hamid Ismailian says his 9-year-old daughter Rira loved playing soccer. 2 years ago, she was killed along with her mother Parisa on board Flight 752. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps shot down the plane with surface-to-air missiles. 85 Canadians and permanent residents died. CSIS says since then that same regime has threatened, intimidated, and harassed victims' families. Now Canada Soccer has invited Iran's team to a friendly match.
I think they have no sympathy, they have no heart for the families of the victims.
Iran run out comfortable winners.
In Iran, sports are tied into politics and the Revolutionary Guard, according to this journalist and activist.
The regime using sports as a political tool to show the rest of the world that this is a normal regime.
It's entirely inappropriate for that match to take place in British Columbia.
The Prime Minister wouldn't say if the government has granted visas to those traveling with Iran's team, but said this.
I think it wasn't a very good idea to invite the Iranian soccer team here to Canada, but that's something that the organizers are going to have to explain.
In a statement, Canada Soccer said it believes in the power of sport to bring together people from different backgrounds and political beliefs, but victims' families called that a slap in the face. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Let's go back to Abbotsford now with Anita standing by. Anita, the devastation from last fall's floods still evident in some cases. But just this week, we've been reporting on worries from farmers about a really cold, rainy spring. It's delaying crops. It's keeping bees from pollinating plants. It's another series of challenges for people who've already struggled so much.
Absolutely, Dan. I mean, normally the Fraser Valley is home to some of the most fertile farmland in the entire country, especially right here on the Sumas Prairie. So when the floods swept across this land and many farmers scrambled to get their animals to safety, those who produce berries and vegetables were left with their own problem, total destruction of their crops. Now, BC's Agriculture Minister, Lana Popham, helped them navigate that time, and her ministry continues to work with producers. And while she says there's much support available, farmers are critical. So the minister met me here last week on the Sumas Prairie to talk about it all. Have a listen. Minister, we're here in Abbotsford walking through a berry row. You know, these plants are completely destroyed. Yeah. You spent quite a bit of time here, especially when all of this was happening. And one thing that really struck people, I think, was your connection to the farmers and the stories that you brought to the rest of British Columbia. What is it about these farmers that has made you feel that connection?
It's a great question. Oh, actually, so just being in this field, I'll just say that it's emotional because I'm just thinking back 6 months ago where I was standing on the side of the road with many of these blueberry farmers, and just a look of shock and devastation on their faces was I'll never forget it. Farmers wear their hearts on their sleeves, and they tell you a lot of things about how their lives are going, and they're in so much pain. But what I really wanted people to understand is that these are people that work every day to feed us, and they're in big trouble. Yeah.
In these 6 months since the floods, what is it that's struck you about their resiliency? Is there any particular story that you've heard?
Oh my gosh, you know, there's just this absolute resilience that's in their blood, and it's remarkable. There's a lot of concern, obviously. We're still making sure that people that need financial support and to get back up in farming, that process is going to take longer, but we've already seen about $25 million get to farmers. We've got in total $228 million, so we've got a ways to go, but we're getting through it, and I think farmers are seeing that happen, and so they're relieved, but mostly they just want to get back and farm. And so when you look at these bushes, I mean, this at this point, we heard it was 12 feet under water.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, And so when I flew over on the helicopter, I couldn't see any of this. It was just like a lake. And because I've spent so much time on the ground out here, I knew the roads and I knew the houses, and some of the roofs of the houses were exposed still, and I had been in those homes. And so at that moment I thought, we can't fix this. This is the worst thing I couldn't have even imagined it being so bad.
Did you have any idea where to start?
I didn't know where we could start. I just knew that we couldn't give up on it. It seemed hopeless, but I felt like if the farmers weren't going to give up, there's no way that we could give up.
So for people who don't know Barrie's well, and that's probably a lot of the province, these plants are destroyed. These have to be ripped out, and the farmers have to replant with new plants. Now, they're saying that insurance is covering a portion of that, but it's not covering the entire replanting, and it's not covering the crop loss really for the next 6 years. What can the government do to help them even more, because they're stressed out? They're feeling this mentally.
So the recovery package, so the $228 million, was really organized to work outside of the programs that already exist. And so within the Ministry of Agriculture, we have what are called business risk management programs, and they're insurance programs. And so some of those programs are for crop interruption, some of them are for price fluctuations, some of them are just crop insurance generally. And so the agri-recovery dollars, partnership with the federal government, we looked at if you didn't qualify for those particular programs that were already on the table, the agri-recovery was on top of that. And so that's true that agri-recovery wouldn't necessarily cover some of this, but we've got programs like agri-stability that would, agri-insurance that would.
So is it, because we've spoken to so many farmers who say, well, I'm out thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars because insurance and government aid isn't covering all of this. So is it just that they don't know how to access the funds?
No, up until last week, farmers' homes weren't considered part of the package. So that's changed as of just 7 days ago. That'll make a big difference, because I think farmers were really worried that they didn't know how they were going to rebuild their homes. And so we've changed that now.
When you see this damage all around you and you think of the faces, the people behind these crops, what's your message to them as they continue to try to rebuild, because they're burning out?
Farmers, in a way, are rock stars these days. And I think a lot of them are starting to realize that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it's extremely difficult. But when I look at a plant, for example, like this, these are going to be ripped out because they have sustained too much damage. But you look at some of these dead branches, and there's like this. Somehow this plant has figured out how to send out a shoot. And this is new life, and this is new energy, and this is kind of like the farmers. They've had a horrendous year, yet a lot of them, they've still got that passion for farming, and they're going to survive, and we need them to.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That devastation that farmers are dealing with is absolutely heartbreaking. I spoke with some blueberry producers before talking with the minister, and their new blueberry plants are on back order until 2024. And after that, it will likely take 3 years to get a crop. So they're looking at no production until 2027. Now, with farmers and residents still struggling, community support is obviously key. We talked to Benit a little bit about this earlier. I want to bring her back in. Benit, what sort of community support is actually in place right now, even 6 months later?
Anita, there's about 200 people that still can't return home. So these are folks that are still looking for food, for supplies, and even mental health support. And there's people here that are just opening up their hearts and lending that helping hand.
A moment to gather, grieve, and laugh.
It means the world to me, to be honest. Emotional support, to camaraderie, to stress relief.
Here at the Yarrow Hub, flood-hit residents can grab a free bite and get supplies, but perhaps more importantly, talk.
It's a place where neighbors can meet and connect and take a break from their properties and their devastation.
A gathering place in Victoria Kewitt's backyard. She opened it in November, and it has blossomed into a space of reflection and community building. Mental health support with a counselor is also on offer every week.
I'm a bit of a hermit myself. I keep to myself on the farm, and that made me come out.
You meet your neighbors and everybody is helping everybody, and it's really community, the community spirit that's got together.
And though the floods happened in November, the need for donations still exists.
We are currently still looking for some furniture items, some rebuild materials. Gas cards are obviously the mint right now.
Community volunteers are echoing the need for support. Here at Gateway Community Church, this food pantry started in response to the floods. Around 25 to 30 families still rely on it every week.
We're still reaching out to a large number of people who are still sleeping in hotels or staying in hotels, so they can come and they can shop with dignity, right? They can grab what they need when they need it.
In the Fraser Valley, 25 charities have also received funding for flood relief efforts. Much of that money coming from the Abbotsford Disaster Relief Fund, which got more than $4 million in donations.
We're still committed that every dollar that we're raising is going to go and help the flood victims. Yeah. And we know that this isn't a short-term problem.
Just amazing to see a community come together like that. And right now I have Abbotsford's Mayor, Henry Braun, with me. And Mayor, what really struck me during those 6 months was how this community supported each other. I think it wasn't just me as someone who, comes from this city, but people across British Columbia were truly amazed by it. It was also a very emotional time. So what has it been like for you and the community in the last 6 months?
Well, this is, as most people have found out that are watching what's going on in Abbotsford, a very resilient, caring, and giving community. And I have seen that in spades over the last 6 months, and it restores my faith in humanity somewhat.
Is there anything that really has stood out to you? I know there was a lot during that time, but since then, any sort of community story that's really stood out to you?
Well, just people helping, strangers helping other strangers. Not everybody on the prairie knows everybody, but even the outpouring from other communities, from, whether it's Township of Langley or Mission or Chilliwack, the things people did, they didn't have to do those things. They did it out of the goodness of their hearts and to try to give people hope who were in positions that were devastating. And I still hear heart-wrenching stories where people have lost everything and they are beside themselves. They don't know what to do. And I try to channel them into opening the right door or opening that door for them. But the caring over your neighbors, I'll bring your cows over to my barn. We'll worry about the cost later and how it'll all work, instead of saying, well, we got to have a contract first. And they just do it out of the goodness of their heart.
Yeah, we saw so many stories like that. And you mentioned the devastation that people are still dealing with. And sure, we're here on a beautiful sunny day, but we know that more rain is going to come. Wind is coming this weekend, but in the future, right? We're dealing with climate change. So where are we at in terms of shoring up that infrastructure to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again? Because a lot of people said it was preventable.
Yes, I agree with that. We knew after the 1990 flood, or within 4 or 5 years following that, what needed to be done. Those reports are still out there, but there was no plan. This time, we've taken it upon ourselves to come up with some options, 4 of them, that we've engaged the public, the Sumas Prairie farmers in particular, and we're going to take all of that feedback and collate it, bring a staff report to council, probably before the end of June. And then we have a plan to present to the senior levels of government. They're waiting for the engagement comments back and what is your preferred option. And I'm hoping that they're ready to go, because I've kept them fully in the loop on what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing. And the farmers need to know, is my investment going to be protected come November, which is not that far away.
Absolutely. And I've heard from some farmers who say they just want to get out of it completely because they are afraid something like this is going to happen again and they can't go through it. So sticking with that theme, we have the Nooksack River, and obviously Washington State plays a big role in this, and we have to work together. So where are we at in that working together? Because BC, I mean, this area really has more at stake than they do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is the best agricultural lands in Canada. We're the #1 jurisdiction from an agricultural perspective. $1 billion in sales, farm gate sales every year. And we have to, if we're serious about our food security and our food sources, we need to protect this infrastructure, or the farms with infrastructure, which is the dikes. And yes, Washington State plays an enormous part because it's their water that caused this. And I've suggested to both Minister Blair and Deputy Premier Farnworth, I hope when you start having your meetings that you're asking for help from Washington State, especially on the Barrowtown, or not the Barrowtown, the pump station on the Sumas River, which is about a $700 to $800 million bill. They should pay for it because it's their water we have to deal with, because it's all gravity from the Nooksack. The elevation drop is about 80 feet or 25 meters, and it's straight downhill towards Barrowtown, which is just over there.
Yeah, and that's concerning for a lot of people living here. Before we let you go, you know, our reporter Benit was talking about the community coming together and the mental health supports that are so needed, because a lot of these people here say that they can't even go back to work because they're so stressed out and in depression and all of that. Human to human, as their mayor, what do you say to them?
Well, I feel with them and for them, because, and I mentioned this actually earlier in another interview, that I am the one thing I don't hear a lot about. I do hear something, and I'm glad you asked the question about mental health, because I am concerned about that. There's people on this prairie that the minute there's a downpour, they're phoning wanting to know, am I safe? And I say, you are safer today than you were before the flood, because we've raised our dikes a half a meter, so we actually have more reservoir capacity behind the dike than we had pre-November flood. But I'm just trying to help them understand that we're working through a process, and I know for them it's taking way too long, but people tell me that we as a city with our options are working at lightning speed. It doesn't feel like lightning speed to me, but I get their point, that we are a lot further ahead with this, with the options than people realize, and we're just about there. But I am concerned about the mental health and their well-being, because for some of them, they're waking. I've talked to farmers who are waking up in the middle of the night and they're reliving what they just went through, and especially when it came to some of the animals, you know, watching the cows that drown, and their hogs and chickens, poultry. Once that's in your brain, you can't just erase that. And so this is going to be a long process for some people, and some people just want to quit. They've had it. And I don't know what to say to them. You know, do you stay? But I'm assuring them that I will do everything as I can as a mayor, and we as a council and our staff, to protect what is out here. The federal government drained this area 100 years ago and then promoted it to the European settlers primarily, not totally, to buy this land, and they would be protected. Well, we're going to be calling on the federal government and the provincial government to reaffirm those commitments, and I hope they do.
Abbotsford Mayor Henry Braun, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that was Abbotsford Mayor Henry Braun live with us in the show today. Johanna Wagstaffe snuck in between. One more check of the weather. We've got this beautiful day out here. Is it going to last?
It's going to be a world of a different day this time tomorrow. There is an impending storm, and I want to get you through it if you're watching from anywhere across the South Coast. Take a look at the special weather statements and warnings now in place for Metro Vancouver. We've got the wind warnings now extended down through the Greater Victoria area and for the Sunshine Coast. This storm is making landfall overnight tonight. A special weather statement for Metro Vancouver and for the Fraser Valley where we're standing. This is where we'll see heavy heavy rain, strong winds, and mountain snow. Snow levels down to 1,100 meters tonight, and you can see that stream in the satellite. The center of this low, for anyone who watches the millibars and for migraine headaches, for example, 990 hectopascals. That is more reminiscent of the kind of storm we would see in a fall setup. So sort of eerie. We're talking about the 6 month later flooding situation, and this is an atmospheric river that's much more reminiscent of a fall storm. Now, luckily, it's not expected to stall out, but watch as I take you through the forecast. So that low looking to make landfall after midnight on the north coast. That's where we're going to see hurricane force winds. Pausing you tomorrow afternoon. Look at all that blue in the forecast. That is fresh alpine snow, and as we keep saying, we are at or above seasonal for snowpack for all of the province. In fact, where we're standing, the lower Fraser, 105% of seasonal. Upper Fraser, 150% of seasonal. So this is going to add to that. This low is fast moving, though. We get behind it for a much needed break for the second half of the week. Just want to show you those rainfall totals, though. The bullseyes, 40 to 60 millimeters. For some areas, Metro Vancouver, I think we could get 20 to 30 millimeters, and this is already being a wet May. Seeing that rain move across to the interior, but this is very much a South Coast story. So let me get you through the week ahead. Stormy tomorrow. Those winds for Metro Vancouver will be high, gusting to possibly 80 kilometers per hour by noon. That front rolls through. We'll actually see clearing back on the island, and then look at that. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, some much deserved sunshine, and Anita, temperatures actually get back up to the high teens. This will be the first time this season we'll hit 17 degrees this weekend. So, that's one of the things that farmers are talking about. We could all use a high teen weekend, though, and it's coming.
No kidding. Well, the mayor was telling me earlier that he remembers last April when it was 30 degrees in April. So
yes.
This is needed for sure.
It is, and we're getting it.
Okay, thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
And thank you for being with us tonight here in Abbotsford as we mark 6 months since BC's horrible floods. And thanks to the people of the Sumas Prairie for speaking so frankly about the struggles they face, as well as the people in Merritt. While it may still be half a year since the flood, the challenges they face and continue to face are still happening. Many have a long road ahead in terms of recovery, and we're going to be sure to check in with them as they continue their journey of that recovery. We leave you now tonight with shots from both our TV special tonight as well as our radio broadcast with Gloria Makarenko earlier today. She was out here as well. Thanks for watching and listening, and have a wonderful evening.